Hi, this is Carol Teskey. I'm the Chief People Officer at Camunda, and I'm here talking with Sid in my quarterly mentoring call. So thanks, Sid, for continuing to do these. One topic I had on our agenda for today is iteration. It's a theme we're trying to embrace in Camunda, but it can be a hard way. It's hard to adapt to iteration at times. So curious to get your thoughts on how you managed to ingrain it in the DNA of GitLab, and what type of blockers or that you saw that you needed to remove, and any words of wisdom you can share with us on how to bring iteration to life.
Yeah, thanks for that. Iteration is very hard. It's the hardest value at GitLab. I think we're maybe the best in the world in it. Well, probably not the best in the world. Probably the best in the world are people who iterate on hardware, because that's even harder. But we're quite good at it, but it's still very hard. And an example of that is I still do iteration office hours, where people at the company say, look, I have this, I want to iterate more. I just don't know how to divvy it up. And we talk about that. Those are live streamed. So if you Google GitLab iteration office hours, you'll find them. But there's a couple of things by which we have learned that will enable iteration. The most important one is strict due dates. So don't say, look, I want this work product. Don't say like, hey, I want a report on XYZ. But say, look, I want the best work you can do by Tuesday or early next week on XYZ. And I understand it's not going to be ready. Another thing is to stimulate smaller changes. If you send a big merge request at GitLab, hopefully someone will push back. Like, look, it would have been faster if you just would have sent 2 smaller things. So push back against big bulky things of work. Allow for future iterations. So when you ask for that report, say, hey, I want the first version of that report, and you'll have 2 more revisions. People get more comfortable if they know they're allowed to change it in the future. Complain if something is too perfect. Like, wow, looks like you spend a lot of time on this, but it's the first time I'm seeing it. Have you iterated properly? Allow for changes. Say, like, don't have the expectation that like, okay, we're going to review the report and I'm going to sign off on it. No, it's going to be a working session to further improve it. So then and then we'll not review your report, but then and then we'll have a working session to improve your report. Like, the goal of the session is to make changes, not to discuss the work product. Allow for cleanup over sign off. So make sure that it's okay to further improve it after it. There's some technical things that we allow for. For example, you could think of a code refactoring that happens after you made the initial version. If you meet about a certain subject, make sure there's a proposal to discuss. So don't go into a meeting like, hey, in this meeting, we're going to come up with our strategy for X. No, in this meeting, we're going to talk about the proposal for strategy X. Someone will have to do the work and come up with a proposal. And they will complain, look, I don't have all the inputs. I can't make a great proposal. It's like, great, it's just the first iteration. Don't worry about it. But I find that meetings are much more effective if there is a proposal, because it's much clearer to see where the differences are. Even if the proposal was totally off and you end up doing something else, it helps the conversation to have a clear, sharp proposal, even when it's inaccurate. Stimulate that everything's in draft. So at GitLab, hopefully you won't see draft on a lot of documents, because it's assumed that things are in draft. So instead of having this draft final culture, no, everything is in draft all the time, and you continually make changes to it. Everything is a live document. Talk about having a low level of shame. Yes, you will be a bit ashamed of your work products if you iterate correctly, and that's okay. Make a clear distinction between 2-way door decisions and 1-way door decisions. So some things are really hard to reverse. Like, if you announce a reorg, you probably have to follow through on what you announced. A lot of things are 2-way doors. Like, even pricing is a classic answer of a one-way door, but even that you can experiment with discount codes for certain things, etc. But many things are like, we can just change that if it's not working. And maybe a last thing, an entry pattern we have seen is that people call changing proposals iteration. That's not iteration. As long as something is a proposal or a strategy or a plan, changing it is just revising something. An iteration is shipping the work product to the real world and getting that feedback. So you actually have to get something all the way to its end state. Maybe with a reduced scope, but you got to go the complete cycle. So don't let a revision be called an iteration.
That's great, Sid. Thank you for those. I think they all make sense. How do GitLab push these throughout the organization?
It requires kind of constant, almost pressure to like set pretty strict due dates and be very ambitious in our planning. So naturally, work will fill the time allotted to it. So you do have to be more ambitious in your planning. For example, at GitLab, we found that when we achieve about 70% of our product planning, but when we allowed for more time, we still achieved about 70% of our product planning. So ambitious planning is part of it. Being inspired by peers. Iteration started after we saw in Y Combinator what other organizations were able to do. And then I think, unlike a lot of organizations, we kept that going for a very long time and kept reinforcing that.
Got it. Thank you. And it's something from memory that it is looked for during interview as well, that if you look for people who, while they know it can be uncomfortable, they lean into it. Exactly.
There's a lot of interview questions. Tell me about the time you really changed the proposal. Tell me about sharing your work early. What did you share where you were a bit ashamed of the quality of the work, but it had to go out really fast? What did you learn kind of shipping something small and then get something bigger? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, great. Okay, so thank you for your time on discussing that there.